The following episode of the Delta League podcast is dedicated to Chicago Pride player Cameron Baptista. Welcome to the Delta League podcast. This week, Cameron Baptista is dead. Baptista broke his neck when he slipped and fell down an embankment in Arizona when he was on vacation. They say he died instantly. Thoughts and prayers go out to his family, friends, and teammates. Such a talented player taken from us too soon. So, we're going to get on to the week's action starting on Monday, where Montreal was hosting Philadelphia and Washington. And in this one, Montreal wins. Montreal 29, Washington 25, Philadelphia 23. Now, this game was delayed due to a protest in downtown Montreal. No word as to what kind of protest it was, but whenever the French get pissed off, there's usually a riot. Now, Shred player Tully Sykes was seen leaving the bench early and going to the dressing room. Teams have a very strict code of conduct that forbids a player from leaving the bench unless they have an injury, a personal emergency, or are ejected from the match. Sykes couldn't be reached, but later on it was revealed that something at dinner did not sit well, and he is spending much of the intermissions on the can. Now, God frickin' speed to Tully Sykes' intestines. Now, the start to this game was delayed, and the third period was also delayed due to a power failure. There were even some considering delaying this game and replaying it on Saturday, but cooler heads did prevail, and this game ended up finishing 2.5 hours late. Now, Philly had yet another breakdown of discipline in this one, so get your pen and paper out because this is going to be fun. This whole thing started with Maelstrom player Nate Taft just demolishing John Holmes Galuccio into the goal. That's a yellow card for Taft, and Galuccio is agitated because it should have been more. Here comes the chain reaction that causes a total meltdown of the reactor. Now, John Holmes Galuccio, he takes down Octavian Womack, and that is an instant yellow card. Womack keeps his cool here. Then, a few rough plays later, Womack takes out Guido Nagaran onto the Philly bench, getting his yellow card. This Philly team is keeping their cool. You know how it is. Griffin Bricker gets spilled into the bench. No call. Philly is irate. Then Washington storms back, takes the 2 points from Philly. Chevy Colella celebrates a little too much in front of the Philly bench. He trips over Harlequin Butcher's foot. They think it's intentional. People start shoving. The whole Philly bench comes out. It's a total melee that could have been 100 times worse, but in the end, the official, Willie Casillas, gives a bench minor to the entire Philly bench, and you haven't seen this team's scorecard. That's why you don't understand just what happened here. Now, John Holmes Galuccio adds 1 yellow card to the yellow card he already received. That equals 4 yellow cards. He gets a 1-game suspension. However, he already had a black card, so now he's gone for 3. Guido Nagaran, now he's got 3 yellow cards. Steve Fotopoulos, 3 yellow cards. Harlequin Butcher, 3 yellow cards. Ariel Vignola, that's 4 yellow cards. He's gone for a game, but hold on. He also already has a black card, so he's gone for 3 games. Lloyd Warfield now has 4 yellow cards. That's a 1-game suspension. And Griffin Bricker, he's got 3 also. And when it's all said and done, there isn't very many players left for next week, I'll tell you that. Just catastrophic decision-making by the Shred at the worst possible time. Now, after the game, there was footage of a Maelstrom player, Nate Taft, partying it up with Washington and Philly fans in a club. You know, at least he won the game. Well, we've had a dozen incidents over the past few years of players hanging out with opposing players after a game. I fully expect there to be new club rules next year as it pertains to partying with opposing players, but whether it passes, the Players' Union is another story altogether. Now, for Montreal, it was Gus Partenza with 7 goals. For Philadelphia, it was Tully Sykes and Suzuki Sato with 6 goals each, and Lloyd Warfield with 6 blocks. And for Washington, it was Chevy Colella with 10 goals, and Sebastiano Guarnieri with 5 blocks. And in the end of this one, Montreal picks up the 4 points. Washington, 2 points. Philadelphia, no score. Now, let's move on to the Wednesday game where Vancouver is hosting Denver and Boston. And in this one, Vancouver picks up the win. Vancouver 31, Boston 22, Denver 21. What the hell happened here? Now, Boston player Vasily Rollins, who's out for the rest of the year with an orbital fracture, just made sure that he never plays the sport of Delta again. Now, the story is Vasily was negotiating a new contract in which he would extend his current contract for an additional 2 years. And apparently Rollins and GM Jack Piccolo have a really good relationship. Rollins thought the negotiations were going well until this Thursday, when the ownership group headed by Adriano Portaro decided they didn't like the guy and put the kibosh on the renewal. So the GM calls Rollins to tell him the bad news, that he may be traded if he doesn't agree to a lower value contract. This doesn't go well with Rollins, who essentially flies to Boston, goes to Jack Piccolo's house, and tries to kick down his door. Essentially, tempers escalate. Rollins pushes Piccolo to the floor. It's just a bad scene. His wife is freaking out, and by this time the police arrive and they tase Rollins and take him downtown. The club made the decision to immediately terminate Rollins. More on this later. Now, suspended Orcas player Kolas Hadi, who won't be back until next year, just ensured he won't be back for a while as he had a violent altercation with his coach, Rory Hannon. The two had to be separated, and this looked like the kind of incident that gets guys traded. Just saying. Now, and this is Delta League. Guys get traded. Everybody gets traded. Now, Denver player Grant Nahn got black-carded in this match. He just blindsided Ravi Cutter, and then Cutter went down with a bloody nose and wasn't too pleased. Cutter gets up and shoves Nahn, gets yellow card. Now, Alexa Saragosa got yellow carded for her own indiscretions, and Emil Saffron, who got ejected for the abuse of the official, and he's retired. Boston got penalized here as well, with Elon Putterman going down with a yellow card, and Kobe Dominguez. This guy is supposed to be back week 17. Not anymore. He gets on the court, instant black card, and his regular season is all but expired. Now, Denver's Randy Magnuson also suffered a bicep strain in this match, meaning he will be out for the next 3 weeks. Now, for Vancouver, it was Romeo De Rosa with 7 goals. We have for Denver, it was Ray Rogers with 7 goals, and Damian Ellis with 6 blocks. And for Boston, it was Dudley Kazdan and Hobo Mickelson with 5 goals each. And in the end of this one, Vancouver picks up the 4 points. Boston, 2 points. Denver, what happened? 0 points. Now, let's move on to Saturday's matinee game, where Detroit is hosting Dallas and Miami. And in this one, we got a tie at the top. It was Detroit 20, Miami 20, Dallas 19. This ended up being the second closest game in the history of Delta League, with 3 teams inside 1 goal spread. For the second time this year, Miami misses out on a win by 1 goal. Now, there are some big fighting going on in the stands in this one. The Detroit crowd was much more raucous than usual, probably due to rather intense tailgate party that had everyone effectively sloshed. Now, suffice it to say, the rather inebriated crowd did not like the tie, but the team gladly took the 3 points. Now, Anatoly Schaefer, who last week collected a Defensive Player of the Week award, this week picks up the Stupid Player of the Week award, and now must polish that new black card and place it beside the other black card he collected weeks before, and proceed to nurse his 3-game suspension in the press box. Now, thereby throwing away any chance of winning the Defensive Player of the Year award. In addition, teammate Corey Vignali picks up a yellow card to make Dallas's night a little bit worse. Now, and even though it wasn't a victory, the team celebrated this one pretty excessively. Perhaps the team was drunk. Perhaps they were bored, because nobody could figure out why they poured onto the court and held the garbage can in the air. Must be the lead in the water. Now, for Detroit, it was Wilt Davola with 5 goals. For Dallas, it was Nathaniel Mansfield with 7 goals. And Bernie Tully with 18 blocks. And for Miami, it was Bob Nyhan with 6 goals. And in the end of this one, Detroit picks up the 3 points. Miami also 3 points. And Dallas, nothing. Now, let's move on to Toronto, where the Towers are hosting Memphis and Salt Lake City, and Memphis stays hot. Memphis wins. Memphis 32, Toronto 26, Salt Lake City 18. Now, Memphis made it out to the court late because they were holding a protest. During the pregame warm-up, a drone followed and harassed Pharaohs player Alan Adam. At one point, the drone hit him in the back of the head. The Memphis squad then demanded the pilot be found or they weren't coming out. So they waited there in the dressing room for 20 minutes until the drone operator was found and detained. Swarm player Moore Scudder was yellow carded. Toronto captain Dan Kamen was also yellow carded, and Pharaohs player Bianca Watson was also penalized for coming onto the court to confront a player who she thought had slandered her. Well, that does it for Watson. That's her 3rd black card of the season. It's a 9-game suspension, and next year is a fading memory for this woman here. Now, the stupid kept going, as after the game, fans jumped the barricade and went after Jermaine Jardetsky. Welcome to Toronto, Jermaine. All I can say is, be happy you're not in Boston. Now, for Toronto, it was Lyles Houston with 7 goals. Carol Cavadon with 8 blocks. For Memphis, it was Burt Town with 8 goals. And Salt Lake City, it was Alexander Farner with 5 blocks. And in the end of this one, Memphis picks up the 4 points. Toronto, 2 points. Salt Lake City, nothing. Now, let's move on to Seattle, where we've got a marquee matchup here where Seattle is hosting Chicago and New York. And in this one, Seattle wins. Seattle 44, Chicago 42, New York 27. This game began with a moment of silence for fallen Chicago player Cameron Baptista. Everyone was totally gutted at his passing this week. This was a very anticipated game, but the untimely death of Baptista just kinda sucked the energy out of this one. Now, Fab Whittlesey broke her toe in this match. She'll be gone 1 week. Seattle Pirates player Rusty Searle will be back in a few weeks. He's been gone all season with an ACL tear, and when he's on the verge of his return, what does he do? He gets on the court. What an idiot. Now, New York player Mohamed Carnesale and Chicago player Jonas Stankovičius got yellow cards for being very aggressive and belligerent on the field of battle, and interferes with the game, collects 2 cards, $10,000 fine, and a game suspension. Now, last week, Chicago player Finn Wehrle came out publicly about his dissatisfaction about his playing time. Now, this week, fans are poking fun at Wehrle's weight gain. Now, he said, yeah, I put on a little weight. I've been dealing with a few physical issues that I won't name, but they keep me from going hard in the gym. I'm working through it with physiotherapy, and if you don't like the fact that I've got a little chunky, that's too bad. When I was in college, I was very lean and very fit, but I always looked a bit too gaunt and sick when I was really shredded. So I took my sister's advice, and she said it's quite possible that it wasn't my ideal body type or weight. So yeah, I put on a few pounds, and besides my injuries, this is the best I've felt in the last 5 years. Finn Wehrle, Mr. Body Positive. Now, Seattle fans began filing out early for this one, which is odd because the game was so close on the top end. I don't know what the traffic is like in Seattle, but it can't be good. Perhaps everyone was racing out to burn Donald Trump in effigy. Anything is possible, but the idea that Delta in Seattle isn't working is absolute bollocks. Now, for Seattle, it was Rob Donoff with 11 goals and Vlad Millet with 9 blocks. For Chicago, it was Venus Pilar with 11 goals. And for New York, it was Ruben Nygaard with 6 goals and Rhino Montalban with 12 blocks. And in the end of this one, Seattle picks up the 4 points. Chicago, 2 points. New York, nothing. Now, on to the last game of the evening where Los Angeles hosts Phoenix and Atlanta. And in this one, Phoenix wins. Phoenix 27, LA 24, Atlanta 14. Atlanta was locked in their dressing room before this match, but it wasn't some random mascot that did it. It was interim GM Sam Malone who locked the doors and laid down the law. There was apparently things flying around the room, and Malone was extremely animated. They were so inspired by this speech that they lost. Now, for LA, it was Freddie Endler with 6 goals, and the debut of Danny Mac, first game this year. 9 blocks. And for Phoenix, it was Jackson Truman with 6 blocks. And Curly Barnabani with 7 goals. And for Atlanta, it was Casey Dobrichka with 5 blocks. And in the end of this one, Phoenix gets the 4 points. LA, 2 points. Atlanta, nothing. Now, let's move on to the standings. Now, up at the top, we got Seattle, 48 points. Chicago, 44 points. Detroit, 43 points. Washington, 37 points. Memphis, 33 points. New York and Denver, 30 points each. Philadelphia, 28 points. Montreal, 27 points. And the playoff line is drawn there. Now, Toronto on the opposite side of the line. Toronto, 27 points. Miami, 27 points. Phoenix, 21 points. Los Angeles, 19 points. Vancouver, 18 points. Boston, 15 points. We got Atlanta, 8 points. Dallas, 8 points. Salt Lake City, 7 points. This week, Seattle is the first team to clinch a playoff berth, and the Swarm are eliminated from the playoffs. And if the playoffs were today, Seattle would play Montreal and Washington, Chicago would play Philadelphia and Memphis, and Detroit would play New York. Detroit would play New York and Denver. Now, let's go now to the goal leaders. Up at the top, Rob Donoff, 101 goals. Glory Moss, Seattle, 81 goals. Rock Weinstein, 79 goals. James Korn, Seattle, 73 goals. Isaac Parker Johnson, Seattle, 71 goals. Venus Pilar, Stefan Grice, 69 goals each. Star Palmer, Chicago, 63 goals. Evan Parawal, Chicago, 62 goals. Cameron Baptista, Chicago, 61 goals. Then Mohamed Carnasale and Travis Valencia, 60 goals each. The offensive players of the week are Rob Donoff from Seattle and Venus Pilar from Chicago with 11 goals each. Now, let's look at the block leaders after week 14. Up at the top, Vlad Millet, Seattle, 74 blocks. Cyrus Holleran, Denver, 65 blocks. Alan Adam, Memphis, 62 blocks. Anatoly Schaefer, 61 blocks. Jackson Truman, Phoenix, 60 blocks. Bernie Tully, Dallas, 58 blocks. Frank Vihano, Harlequin Butcher, 56 blocks each. Emmett Ruan, Seattle, 55 blocks. Kofi Dominguez, Vancouver, 54 blocks. Romeo Da Rosa, Vancouver, 50 blocks. And Rhino Montalban, New York, 49 blocks. The defensive player of the week is Bernie Tully from Dallas with 18 blocks. Now, here are the leaders in GXB rating after week 14. Up at the top, Rob Donoff, Seattle, 42-42. Lori Moss, Seattle, 35-64. James Korn, Seattle, 32-12. Rhino Montalban, New York, 25-97. Isaac Parker Johnson, Seattle, 21-30. Mohamed Carnasale, New York, 2100. Bernie Tully, Dallas, 2088. Venus Pilar, Chicago, 2070. Romeo Da Rosa, Vancouver, 1900. Star Palmer, Chicago, 1827. Gus Partenza, Montreal, 1824. And Larry McMaster, Denver, 1798. Now, let's move on to the league news. Cameron Baptista, who died in an accident this week, the Pride have announced that they will raise his number to the rafters next week when they host Toronto and Atlanta. The police have investigated the accident and determined that there was absolutely zero foul play and he simply tripped and fell down the embankment. Just a senseless loss of a great player. Now, more on the Vasily Rollins incident. He's been charged with trespassing, destruction of property, and assault. Suffice it to say that the ownership group got their way one way or another. Now, repercussions from the Kolas Hadi incident in Vancouver, and this isn't like the John Steyan suspension or the Tommy Anastos suspension because punches were thrown in those incidents. Hadi put his hands on the coach. Some harsh words were said, and afterward Hannon told him, "You're never going to play for my team anymore." Hadi said, "We'll see about that." So he's been fined $50,000 and been given a 4-game suspension. You bet your ass he's going to be traded. Now, League Commissioner Darcy DeMello said that marijuana was definitely coming off the banned list next year, along with some other substances including magic mushrooms and some other homeopathic medicines that were previously on the list because they artificially raised testosterone. But those substances will be starting to be discontinued next year. So, all good. Now, due to the death of Cameron Baptista, we're going to forego the mailbag and the shop zone for this week and do a super one next week. Now, here are the games and predictions for Week 15. Now, on Monday, we've got Salt Lake City hosting Montreal and Miami. And I think Montreal and Miami might determine the fate of this standings ladder. Because, to be honest, Toronto doesn't seem to want it bad enough. And it would be amazing if Miami could pick up their second win of the season and vault over Toronto in the standings, but Montreal is playing much better now. I'm taking the Maelstrom to pick up 4. Miami picks up the Perpetual 2, and Salt Lake City will officially pick up their golf clubs because they gave up 5 weeks ago. Now, let's move on to Wednesday with Chicago will take on Toronto and Atlanta in an afternoon game. And if Toronto somehow drops 2 points to Atlanta in this game, they should just relocate the franchise to Albuquerque. I don't think that's happening. If Atlanta loses this game, they'll tie the record for the most losses in a single season with 11. Nobody wants that record, but Atlanta seems poised to break it. It will be an emotional night as Chicago raises Cameron Baptista's number to the rafters, and I don't think this team is losing this game. Toronto keeps their playoff heart beating for one more week as they struggle to get out of their own way. Now, let's move on to the Saturday matinee game where Denver is hosting LA and Philadelphia, and I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. LA has been much better lately, but I don't think they have enough gas in the tank to overcome this deficit. Philly is playing for their playoff lives here, and Denver has really had a sad collapse since they started the season undefeated. Denver is much better than this, and I think they're much better than Philly. Philly just lost a bunch of players to a very frustrating loss of composure, and I think this carries over to Saturday, where the Fallen Angels pull off the upset, and Philly goes home with nothing again. Now, we'll move on to Memphis, where the Pharaohs will be hosting Detroit and Washington, and this is actually a very good game on paper, with serious consequences and playoff implications. Memphis is the hottest team going into this game. They've made a very rapid rise through the standings over the past few weeks. Washington, conversely, has not been very good at all down the stretch. I think Memphis wins a very close game here, with Detroit getting the deuce. Now, let's move on to Dallas, where the Lone Stars are hosting Vancouver and Boston. Good Lord, have mercy. This Saturday evening game is going to be a slog. None of these teams have impressed this year. Dallas is among the league's worst teams. Boston is not far off. And I don't think an upset of any kind is truly impossible. But what's even more impossible is to make anybody give a shit about this game. I'm taking the Orcas for the win. Now, Saturday game where Phoenix is hosting Seattle and New York. And based on New York's performance last week, it doesn't look like they have a chance against the defending champions. Seattle is only 8 points shy of the new record for points in a single season, and 3 wins shy of the record for the most wins in a season. Now, last year's Seattle team finished 13-1-2-0-1-0 with 55 points. And they're on pace to shatter those records with 5 games to go. Now, Phoenix doesn't stand a chance here. The best Phoenix can do is to play out the string in an admirable fashion as possible. Now, New York should take the 2 points here, but always beware of their position on the ladder. Nobody wants to finish in 4th place, because that means you'd face the Pirates in the Wheel of Fire tournament. And now, that is only 5 weeks away. Join us next week when the Delta League podcast continues. Rest in peace, Cameron Baptista. See ya.
This is Delta 2.